Alex.
And I'm Shane.
And this is the RPM podcast.
And welcome back to testing day 2 of 2021, where we see 10 cars go round in circle and we try to decide who's got the fastest car overall. But at the end of the day, we don't know. But some interesting discussion points to be had today. Teams have racked up the laps again. We've got some slightly faster laps. We've got some slightly slower laps. We've got some mechanical issues and more spins. But more importantly, there wasn't much sand on the track today, so it made the drivers' lives ever so slightly easier. And I should imagine the mechanics back in the pits are also thankful about that as well. So like last time, we're going to go through each team in in championship order from last year, starting with Mercedes and ending with Williams. We're going to talk about the general comments and how the teams are doing as a whole. So without further ado, let's go to Mercedes.
So yeah, starting off with our defending champions then, it was a slightly more encouraging day, although still not the kind of performance that we might expect from Mercedes, considering recent performances. Early on, it was difficult as we saw Hamilton spinning at turn 13. He ended up beaching the car and bringing out a red flag, and that was pretty much his session over. He ended up pretty far down the timing sheet as a result. Still seemed to be struggling with grip. I noticed that possibly it was on Twitter, I didn't see exactly where, but Romain Grosjean made some comments about the instability of the Mercedes at the rear end. So you think he would know he has some familiarity with with going fast around that track and suddenly coming to a stop as well. And so that was interesting to see Hamilton, of all people, struggling in that car. Yeah, still a little bit underwhelming from Mercedes overall, but we should remember that testing is there to iron out the problems as much as anything else. So rather that they have these problems now, if this were FP1, then yes, we'd have cause for concern. But ironing out the problems is exactly what testing is for. The good news was that they did eventually end up in their natural habitat on the top spot, courtesy of Valtteri Bottas.
Yep, Bottas managed to set the fastest lap of the day, 1:30.289. However, we must take into consideration he was on the fastest tyre compound, and I believe he was running relatively low fuel because he came into the pits half an hour before the end of the session and then came out and had a couple of hot laps. I just want to touch on what Romain Grosjean said on Twitter. It's very interesting. If you haven't seen it, you guys should go read up on his tweets. But he's mentioning how that corner is a really important corner in the race because it shows how much downforce, how stable your cars are. Because it goes uphill, it's a little bit off camber, and it's over to the right. So he goes, you really need a good planted car to be able to take that corner flat out. And that's where we saw Hamilton become unstable and spin it. And unfortunately, end up beaching it. But like you said, nothing too concerning because every time something happens like this, the issue gets fixed or the issue is brought to light and then they can work on the issue. If you go through the whole of testing and don't have any issues whatsoever, that's fantastic. But then you haven't learned anything. You haven't learned what's the fragile bit on your car. You haven't learned what to potentially look after. So I'm just trying to bring up the positive points for Mercedes at the moment. Like you said, there's not too many. Still pretty underwhelming for the reigning multiple world championship winning car and team. Hamilton seemingly looks like he struggles, but we've seen this in race weekends where he's had an awful FP1, an awful FP2, an awful FP3, comes to qualifying and the car brings together, he's ironed out any issues and he smashes it out the park. So maybe Mercedes are just taking a little bit longer to get everything ironed out and they might not be changing everything dramatically like some teams. They might just making small tweaks in the right direction instead of changing the wing dramatically. I don't know, but it's an interesting day for Mercedes. Like you said, not where they should be, but it was better than yesterday.
Certainly. So continuing more or less a positive testing session we have for Red Bull as well. Now, the car in general, from what I saw of the laps, definitely looked pretty balanced out there. Overall, looked pretty steady. It was Perez out there today, as opposed to Verstappen. Seemed a pretty comfortable session overall for him, other than when his engine cover seemed to get blown off or something. He was approaching Latifi. I think this was coming into turn 1.
Yeah.
And at first, it almost looked like he hit him, but Then we watched it back, and obviously some kind of, maybe there was a loose part on the engine cover, something not screwed in properly. It's a very unusual thing to happen. It has happened in the past, but its whole sort of engine cover seemed to explode into pieces. It was quite dramatic looking, really. I can only assume that there was something loose, or just it happened to catch the vortices behind the car in some way, behind the Williams. That brought out a red flag as the marshals all ran out and cleared all of the debris as much as they could. Other than that, it was fairly unremarkable for Perez, just putting in a pretty solid shift, doing some long runs, and no doubt getting used to that car. But otherwise, that Red Bull is looking pretty planted overall.
Yeah, 117 laps is nothing to be embarrassed about. That's a huge amount of laps for one driver over a single day, more than twice an actual Grand Prix weekend over the whole day. So that's fantastic. The car does look planted. Now, interestingly, you're not seeing too many sparks at Bahrain at the moment, like we usually do during a race weekend or during qualifying. It's because all the cars are slightly higher than usual because they don't want to be damaging the floor. A lot of these floors are like the first or second prototypes. They don't want to be damaging anything. And also, by raising your car a little bit, you're also decreasing the overall performance. So you're not giving away too much because it's not a true representation. So that's why we haven't seen many sparks today, which is just goes to show that these cars have still got a lot to give. But as for Red Bull, the car looks solid. It looks planted. It's taken every corner quite well. And yeah, 117 laps is a great effort today.
Okay, on to McLaren then. Ricciardo, once again, with the fastest time in the morning session. Obviously, he likes it out there in the morning. And that was, again, I can't help but find that to be good news. There's not too much to be drawn from it information-wise, but it still shows that McLaren are perhaps going out there, seeing what the car is capable of on those shorter runs and those faster runs. And Norris, again, was pretty positive. But I don't really have too much to say about McLaren. We mentioned in the previous episode, I talked about this change to their diffuser. There doesn't seem to be any sort of complaints about its legality. It seems like it's a sort of legal aspect of the car. So hopefully that will bring some performance boosts for them.
Absolutely. I've got nothing else to add apart from, in comparison to the rest of the grid, the McLaren guys managed to achieve 104 combined laps over their two drivers. It actually puts them in 9th place overall. But again, it's still a great amount of laps. It's still crossed the 100 mark, which is fantastic for the majority of the grid to do so. Again, I'm trying to keep a little bit reserved. I get a little bit excited because Daniel went P1 almost straight away and kept that position for the whole of the first part of the session. Just trying to reel it in a little bit and just think about the long picture.
It's just seeing McLaren Mercedes at the top of the timesheet. You're like, yes,
it's going to happen.
It's
going to happen. This is the year. So next is Aston Martin. And pretty similar day to yesterday, actually. Yesterday, they had some issues with with reliability. And today, they've achieved a little bit, some more laps. They've achieved 80 altogether from Sebastian Vettel and Lance Stroll. Vettel only completing 10. But they had a gearbox issue. They were plagued with the same issue the Mercedes had on day one. So that kept Vettel out of the track for the whole of the first session, which was a shame. But they went back out in the afternoon, did some long runs, and the long run pace looks good. Lance Stroll managed to complete 70 laps by himself, which is, again, really good, and only a 10th off P1 at the end of the day. So I think it's encouraging signs that these seemingly midfield teams are still quite far up the top of the grid when it comes to lap time. And I know you can't read too much into it, but we all thought Mercedes would have come into this preseason testing and absolutely dominate 2, 3, 5, a second ahead of everyone else. They might still do that. We haven't seen day 3 yet. But Bottas topped the time sheets and Aston Martin is only a 10th behind, which is great news for the rest of the grid.
Yeah, overall, we mentioned in our day 1 discussion that the mood around Aston Martin is generally pretty positive. It seems like they're overall, once they are out on track, the general pace seems to be pretty good. You already mentioned Stroll ended up 3rd fastest for day 2, not too far off the top. Should have mentioned yesterday, I didn't realise this until after the fact, that Stroll had some issues with his electrics on day 1 of testing. Vettel had issues with the gearbox today, like you say, very similar to what happened with Mercedes. Possibly some reliability issues creeping in for Aston Martin, but when they do get on track, it looks generally pretty solid. So, yeah, hopefully they can iron out some of these creases, which, as we said, is exactly what testing is for. On to Alpine then. So we got to see Alonso finally out on track with the second fastest time in the morning. And he also did 128 laps in total. Was that the most out of any driver? I think maybe Latifi did more. Yeah. Alonso had the second highest number of laps out of any individual driver. I watched the onboard from his lap that he did in the morning. You can see the impact of the wind, although it did die down later on. But to be honest, Fernando looks pretty comfortable, all things considered. And this guy's going around with metal plates in his face and, he's basically not been in a Formula One car for several years. Yeah, he looked pretty comfortable and looked to be out there putting in some good times.
Very consistent times and very consistent laps as well. Never really missed an apex, never really went wide, didn't come off the track. I mean, we're talking about a world champion here who, admittedly, he's been out of Formula One for 2 years, but he's not stopped racing and he's clearly got so much talent to give. And he just come in, first time in the car, bam, 127 laps, very consistent. Like I said, didn't really do anything wrong. And that doesn't surprise me because we're talking about Fernando Alonso here. So if the car's got pace, we can expect some good things from that team this year.
According to Ted Kravitz, Alonso was pooed on by a bird in the paddock. Did you hear this?
Oh, yeah, I did.
Apparently this is good luck. I don't know.
Yeah. I've never found it to be good luck or anything when I've been pooed on by a bird.
Yeah, Alonso's welcome to that.
Welcome back to Formula One. Get pooed on.
Did I see that Alpine were using blue Flovis paint?
Oh, I don't know. That would have been hard to see, but maybe that's the point.
Yeah, I think that they were using, it was just about viewable, but it appeared like they were using, because it was on the parts of the rear suspension. And I think they were talking about it on the broadcast that it appeared that they were using some blue Flovis paint to make it harder to see. So that was an interesting move from Alpine there.
Right, next on the cards is Ferrari, and a slightly better day for Ferrari, completing a total of 129 laps. Not Sebastian Vettel, there we go. That's my first mistake. Ted made a couple more today, so I'm going to forgive myself. Charles Leclerc completing 73 and Carlos Sainz completing 56. Both drivers didn't look too comfortable in the car in neither the long runs or the short ones. The car, I don't know, again, you can't read too much into it. It doesn't look like it handles very well and looks a little bit slow. But they might be, I don't know, use the word, sandbagging. You never know. They might be, pulling back and not showing us everything they've got. But Carlos had a couple more spins today. I'm glad to see that Twitter reacted appropriately and it was a little bit more calmed down than yesterday. But it does go to show that car may not be as stable as we expect a Ferrari to be. And but we'll see what happens throughout the year. I mean, it's day 2 of preseason testing. But Ferrari not quite out of the woods as of yet. They seem to be having a couple of woes, although they're stacking up the miles, so it's heading in the right direction.
Yeah, a few more spins, and Leclerc went wide a few times as well. Just generally, they seem to be a little unsettled, and more positive in terms of number of laps. But pace-wise, the Ferrari is not really impressing anywhere. It's not really sort of making it happen in any particular part of the track. So still a long way to go for the prancing horses. They seem to be pretty committed to it, and hopefully things will continue to improve going into day 3. But not too much to say about them otherwise.
So AlphaTauri's next, and we've got lots of positive things to say about day 2 for AlphaTauri. Lots of laps, 142 between both their drivers. Their pace was on point on both their long runs and short runs, and I think they had the fastest Sector 3 for quite some time. So the car looks good on track, livery-wise and pace-wise. So again, just a really positive day for AlphaTauri, and I'm excited to see what they can bring to the field.
Yeah, it does generally look very positive for AlphaTauri. They seem to be on something of a mission to put themselves into the upper midfield. Gasly in particular looking very strong heading that far up the timesheets again. Only a 10th off Bottas by the end of the afternoon session. Yuki Tsunoda as well, for a complete rookie, looking pretty comfortable. I understand that the AlphaTauri car itself is very I mean, it sounds like a silly thing to say about a car, but it's very drivable. It's very
Yeah.
easy to get to grips with. It seems to be a bit of an all-rounder handling-wise. It's probably a dream to have when you're a rookie.
Yeah.
But generally seemed pretty problem-free. They didn't seem to have any particular issues. Neither driver was like spinning all over the place or looking unsettled. The long-run pace in particular of the AlphaTauri looks very strong. And to have Gasly that far up the timesheets by the end of it is a pretty powerful statement by the supposed Red Bull sister team. So
Yeah, not
very
to mention
exciting.
that Gasly was running a slower tyre as well, a harder tyre than what Bottas was doing, and still managed to put in that fantastic lap. It's all good things for AlphaTauri, and they're pushing for that top of the midfield team, potentially looking to attack whatever team might end up in P3, because it's seemingly not looking like Ferrari at the moment, was what we expected coming to this season potentially. But who knows? It's good news. The field's definitely getting closer for some teams.
Yeah, it's all still a little bit up in the air overall, which is kind of what we want. Makes things a bit more exciting. So Alfa Romeo then, we had Giovinazzi for the whole day again, which does make sense because I don't think Kimi needs much extra time in the car, to be honest. I think he's had plenty of experience. So it was good that they did the obvious thing and gave Antonio the time in the car. Speaking of Kimi, I believe he was late to the press conference in the morning. Supposedly they were waiting for him to turn up. Maybe he was on his yacht. But otherwise, 125 laps for Giovinazzi, who I thought put in a very impressive session. At times, the pace of that Alfa Romeo looks stronger than the Ferrari. And I mentioned when we did our launch reaction for Alfa Romeo that I think that the Ferrari engine was hiding a surprising amount of performance for that Alfa Romeo in certain circumstances last year. I'd be very interested to see whether improvements on the PU can unlock a significant amount of potential in that Alfa Romeo, because Giovinazzi, I think, has shown some potential. Kimi Raikkonen's no slouch, obviously. So be very interesting to see what they can manage when it comes to going onto the timesheets proper. Otherwise, he ended up faster than Leclerc by the end of the day. I think he finished sixth, was it, Giovinazzi?
Giovinazzi finished fifth.
Fifth even, yeah. So even better.
Yeah. Yeah, ahead of both Ferraris, which is, again, very interesting. We'll see what that car has got with the new Ferrari engine in it in 2 weeks' time around the track in qualifying.
Haas then. It's generally pretty good for Haas in terms of number of laps they were putting down. When you combine their lap total over the 2 days, they're currently sitting in the middle of the pack in terms of the number of laps they've done. So that's pretty positive for them when you consider that all they can really do is just understand their car, because we know that they're not going to develop it. All they can do is just understand where it's best suited. Mick Schumacher did have a little moment in a practice pit stop where he punted away the front jack, which hadn't quite been pulled away as the light went green. Other than that, the general pace of the car is more or less as expected. It's not blowing up the timesheets or anything. But in terms of reliability and the fact that they're putting the laps in, generally not too bad for Haas today, I thought.
Yeah, I've got not much else to say on it. Fantastic job getting 162 laps in. It's the highest of any team today. So the reliability's there. They're getting the mileage in, which is fantastic for both their rookie drivers. Like you mentioned, Mick had that slight issue in the pits, but I guess as a new driver, you're keeping your eye on that light, and as soon as you see the green light, you're gonna put your right foot down, and Jack Man just needs to get out of the way. It's not his responsibility at the end of the day to check that everyone's clear around the car. That's what the green light's for. So they need to look into that. As for Nikita, a strong day, 76 laps, which is, again, absolutely brilliant. Almost had an incident with Lewis Hamilton, but Lewis came onto the track from going wide or from coming off. I can't remember what the incident was, but was on the racing line and was going slow. Nikita was seemingly on a racing lap or like just a fast lap and had to take avoiding action. So slight hiccup in that sense, but Nikita did well to get out of the way and not cause an incident. And it just goes to show that you could be a 7-time world champion and you might still get in the way of your new rookies. You're not invincible. So people have just got to keep their eyes peeled, because as much as there's only 10 cars on the track, sometimes you will run into one another, which we saw a couple of times today, cars getting quite close. That's why the Red Bull lost its engine cover, seemingly, because it got into the dirty air of the Williams. So how about we just all spread out and give each other some space? Keep the fighting to practice and qualifying.
Yeah, you might get in trouble. It might get in the mix with the rookies, and also you might end up P15 on the timesheets after beaching it. So no guarantee. When we saw we got Sebastian Vettel and Lewis Hamilton at the bottom of the timesheets today, the two most successful drivers on the grid. So
they have 11 world championships between them, and they're at the bottom of the timing sheets.
And then at the top of the timesheet, so obviously Bottas is at the very top. But then after that, we've got Gasly, Stroll, Norris, Giovinazzi, Leclerc, Latifi, like all these sort of far less experienced younger drivers. So yeah, results-wise, very, very interesting, very, very interesting stuff overall. Let's move on to Williams then. 132 laps for Latifi today. I thought that was really, really good. They really were putting out the long runs out there. Very strong showing from Williams. Latifi did have a little moment down at turn 1, forcing Leclerc to make some evasive maneuvers, but otherwise put in some decent times. And I thought the Williams appeared pretty strong in Sector 2, especially, which is where obviously a lot of the corners actually are. So it's some interesting performance from Williams. They were no slouches. They weren't sort of falling even down into the bottom third. They were pretty strong where they stood. And I believe that Latifi's ended up 7th, wasn't it? His fastest time was 7th on the timesheet. So yeah, pretty impressive stuff, I thought, and some great long run pace from the Canadian.
Yeah. Like we've said time and time again, it's hard to compare teams against each other. And you can't really compare Latifi against yesterday's driver because you've got, an experienced Formula 1, a little experienced Formula 1 driver against a complete rookie being a test driver. But interestingly, like you said, Sector 2 was very strong for Williams in a sector where they shouldn't be strong and haven't been strong for a couple of years because it's got undulating corners, heavy braking zones. The acceleration needs to be there with the traction and the grip. And they were setting personal best time and time again, which is great news for that team. I'm really interested to see what George can do tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be a really interesting day because last day of testing, if you're going to push your engine to the limit, if you want to push your engine to the limit, it will be tomorrow afternoon. So keep your eyes peeled and we'll certainly be looking into that. But a really strong start to pre-season testing for Williams, but we're in the middle of it now. We're 2/3 of the way through. So a fantastic set of days for Williams racing.
Definitely. So just coming on to look at the sort of overall combining of day 1 and day 2, we just look at the total lap counts for all the teams. Actually, Alpine at the top with 257 and Red Bull 1 lap behind on 256. They're actually equaling Alfa Romeo also on 256. AlphaTauri 253. Generally, a lot of the teams in that sort of 250, 240 range at the moment. At the bottom of the pile, though, Mercedes with 162. Not where we would expect them to be. Maybe some concerns being raised in the Mercedes garage about the lack of running. I mean, they've got 1 day left to do it now. And like you say, we're going to be seeing maybe things being turned up a little bit more, some proper quali sims being done tomorrow. And Mercedes probably don't feel like they've got their long run pace out of the way yet.
No, what any team needed coming into this pre-season testing this year was to have 3 uninterrupted days where they can get as many miles and as many laps done as possible, running heavy fuel loads, light fuel loads, adjusting the front wing, like you said, race pace, quali pace, and then ultimate fast pace if they really want to show their cards. And Mercedes, I just haven't managed it. They've had, a day and a half where they should have had 2 full days. And because we've only got 3, that half a session is really going to impact them. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're getting a little bit worried. I mean, they're Mercedes. They'll go back to the factory and they'll iron out all the issues they've come across. They'll stick a driver in a simulator for the next 2 weeks. And it wouldn't surprise me if they turn up to Bahrain and they're at the top end of the field, if not the top. But it certainly is raising some questions about the reigning world champions.
It's hard to believe that they won't still be as Mercedes as ever when it comes to the real Grand Prix weekend. But and the fact that Bottas did eventually get up to the top of the timesheets feels kind of not really impressive. It's exactly what we expect from them. So the fact that they eventually managed to squeak one in by the end of day 2 feels like almost a little bit like saving face. Like they went out there with low fuel and the best tyres to go, well, come on, just put us up the top so we can at least say we got on the top at least 1 point. So maybe some question marks for Mercedes.
That's what sticks out for me is that actually they were nowhere near the top for the majority of the day. And it was in the last half an hour he came in for we don't know what the fuel load is, but we know they came in for the softest set of tyres and then took a couple of laps and set the fastest time. Maybe that was just a confidence thing. Maybe they just needed to do it for themselves. I don't know, but tomorrow will be very telling. As much as it won't be telling because we can't read anything into preseason testing, it'll be very interesting to see what teams complete the fastest laps, what teams complete the most laps, and if we see any more reliability issues.
As Shane says, we can't read too much into testing, but thanks for listening for the past 25 minutes of us reading into testing. What do you think of everything that's been going on day 2 or day 1? Do let us know if there's anything we've missed, or if you've got any questions or any comments on what's been happening so far in the action on track. Do send us your thoughts to us at RacePerMinute on Twitter, or you can get in touch at raceperminute.com on our website. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, you can comment below. If you enjoyed the episode, then do give us a rating or a like. And if you really enjoyed the episode, you can subscribe for more wherever it is that you're getting Race Per Minute. If you're on your podcast app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, there'll be an option to follow or subscribe, so you'll keep up to date with all the latest episodes. And if you really want to support the show, best way to do that to help us keep the quality content coming and get your hands on some lovely rewards, Discord access, merchandise, shout-outs, you can appear on the start of every single video, and more. You can donate as little as £1 a month at patreon.com/raceperminute. So day 3, the last day. Hard to believe that testing is almost over already. Just one more day to find out what these cars are capable of before 2 weeks to actually get them ready to go racing in Bahrain once again. So we will see you again tomorrow.